As we mentioned a few weeks back in David's story, power got the best of David. Power can be intoxicating. You get your own palace. That's pretty cool. And then a conquest here and a conquest there. And then soon, because you're king, people stop in the street and they bow to you. And you've got cupbearers and armor bearers and valets. And soon all of this stuff takes a life of its own. And soon, because you're king, you just make all of your own choices. You don't look at the menu anymore. You just order what you want. That's the life of a king. I'll have the lamb, the eggplant, and some olives. Let the kitchen deal with whether or not it's available. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Excellency. What else may we get for you? Anything you need. Well, if you live like that long enough, getting anything you want, soon you might lose sight of where the line is. His general, Joab, is out at war. He and the army are out fighting on behalf of the palace. But David is in Jerusalem, uncharacteristically home during the battle, in the palace. And one day he walks out onto the terrace, looking around at his vast, great empire, all his domain, all his subjects. He is the king, after all. And there is this woman, not too far away. He can see quite well. She's bathing. And from his high terrace, he looks over and he sees her just fine. Just fine. He looks closely. He thinks it might be Sofia Vergara. But alas, it's not. He learns her name is Bathsheba. He's the king. Tonight I'll have lamb and eggplant and olives and I think a date with her. Never mind that he's got several wives already. He is the king. Never mind that she's already married to a guy named Uriah. Soon you just lose sight of where the line is. Meanwhile, out on the battlefield, Joab, the loyal general, is leading his troops in war. Joab is David's nephew, but he did not get this job through nepotism. He is a good commander. He is really good at his job. Whatever the king needs, Joab produces. No questions asked, this guy's going to get it done. He does what good employees do. There is a time-tested 3-point plan to success in any profession. Number 1, find out who your boss is. Number 2, find out what your boss wants. Number 3, deliver it. It always works. He's figured this out. He does his job. He's good at it. Clear, simple, clean. Deliver what is required. But if that's the only ethic you live by, soon you could lose sight of where the line is. David calls Joab in, closes the door, and says, "We have a problem. I'm going to need your help." "Yes, sir." "Bring Uriah in from battle to spend some time with his wife. Turns out she's expecting in March, if you understand what I mean." "Yes, sir, I'll bring Uriah home for a little R&R." Now, you see, Joab hasn't done anything wrong, right? He didn't fetch her from her bath. The baby's not his. He's just a loyal employee doing what the boss wants done. But soon you lose sight of where the line is. And now a second time, sent by letter, but as though it were in this conversation, Joab calls him in again, or David calls Joab in again, closes the door and says this: "Joab, thank you. You did as I asked. You brought Uriah home for time with his wife. But Uriah is back on the battlefield. And out of loyalty to his fellow soldiers, he could not come home and do what I asked. He slept in the guest room all week. It turns out that as powerful as King David is, nobody is more powerful than a good person's sense of what is right. David says to Joab, we've got a problem. Joab's thinking, why does he keep saying we've got a problem? I haven't done anything. But David continues. The Uriah situation isn't going away. Bathsheba is, well, buying clothes of a different size. Joab, the battlefield is a dangerous place. People on both sides die. Good men die in battle. Somebody's going to die. So let's just move Uriah up front. Somebody's going to die anyway. Let's make sure this goes away for good. And Joab, the faithful nephew, the loyal general, isn't he kind of like the guy who passes notes in the 5th grade? He's just trying to help. This is what loyal friends and good employees do. But soon you lose sight of where the line is. You remember when Oliver North stood trial for his role in Iran-Contra. He admitted under oath that he had previously lied to Congress, but he believed in the goal of what they were doing, and besides, the people above him told him to do it. You remember he admitted to altering official records, deleting references, but he testified that Robert McFarland asked him to. It's what the boss wanted. How could he be guilty? The Atlanta school system teacher scandal seems simple enough to the guy driving the Bentley. But when the teacher's called into the principal's office, and the principal says, Joab, we have a problem. We need better test scores. And look, in the end, this is what's going to be best for the school and for the kids. I need you to spend a night or two with a stack of tests and erasers and see if you can't get our test scores up a little. I don't have a more loyal teacher than you. I know I can count on your help. She's a single mother of 3 children, and her boss told her to do it. And soon you could lose sight of where the line is. The lawyer knows what the firm expects and knows what the outcome must be. Must be. She researches, looking for only testimony that will help her case, looking only for precedents that will help her case. You do what is needed to get the outcome the firm wants. It's not a lie, it's just a stretch. And soon you lose sight of where the line is. I have a friend in another church. He'd be in his 40s now, but he was about mid-30s when this story happened. He came to me just in a gut wrench. This guy's sales career was soaring, a really impressive young professional. He had a great house. It was a big mortgage, but it was a great house, a climbing career. His wife stayed home with their 2 young daughters. Country club membership that he couldn't use much because he's always on the road closing deals. High pressure sales job, but he was doing well at it because he knew if you're going to make it to the next step, you've got to beat out everybody else at this level. You've got to outwork, outperform everybody at this level if you're moving to the next. His boss told him, the company has already identified you as a hypo. That's company shorthand for high potential. And one day his boss came in and told him that there were some guys coming into town who represented a big account. I need you to entertain them, he said. Here are a couple of restaurants they want to go to, and here are a couple of clubs they want to visit. He looked at the list, and he recognized some of the club names. Most of them were on Cheshire Bridge and had free buffets. What are you supposed to do? Is he supposed to tell his boss he doesn't want to help the company land the sale? Do you see Joab's dilemma? Isn't that far away from us? You want to be a loyal team player. You want to be a good professional. You can't risk losing the job and the house you're upside down on. And besides, I let her copy my answers. I wasn't cheating, she was. Soon you lose sight of where the line is. Let's look again at the biblical story and our four main characters: Bathsheba, Uriah, David, and Joab. Bathsheba goes the way of most victims. She's mentioned only once by name. And like most victims, her pain goes ignored. Uriah is blameless throughout the story. He's depicted as honorable and loyal and pure, and most of us just can't relate to that at all. But we can relate to the other two characters, because David and Joab have stories of deceit and lies and things they hope stay covered up and never come to light. And we know that story too well. Like them, we've justified little things that grew to bigger things. We didn't mean for it to. As one commentator said, we just let our personal sin get scapegoated by a combination of circumstances. Never intending to do evil. None of us ever intended to do evil. It was just small concessions and a little fudging and harmless flirting and looking the other way, and soon you lose sight of where the line is. Now, you could make the case that David is the real villain in this story, and that Joab is just a loyal servant trying to serve the king. Or you could make the case that Joab's really the slimiest person in the whole story. But assigning portions of blame don't get us very far, do they? Here's what's interesting to me. It's how these two men in their transgression dealt with it so differently, and what the outcome was of the way they dealt with their sin. Now, David's story, of course, is familiar to us. His spiritual advisor, Nathan, comes in, confronts the king, an incredibly bold act from a servant, right? He confronts the king about his sin, talks to him about his betrayal and selfishness and cruelty. And David's response to being confronted is popularly ascribed to Psalm 51. David is said to have written this prayer in response to his role in the Bathsheba and Uriah betrayals. Here's part of that prayer. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. According to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Now, I told you this sermon was co-written with a bunch of 20-somethings. One of them said, "That reminds me of Usher's confession too." I had to look it up. So I'm thrown and I don't know what to do but to keep on doing my confessions. Sitting here stuck on stupid trying to figure out when and what and how I'm going to let this come out of my mouth. That's what happens when you work with 20-somethings. But David said, "Create in me a clean heart." And now, forgiven and renewed, David turns from a life of self-indulgence to a life of searching for the leadership and guidance of God in his life. Now, I know that is a little bit oversimplified, but David does realize where the line is and that he has crossed over. David keeps failing, but he keeps repenting. He keeps coming back to God's great hope for his life. David fails big, but he continues to crawl back to the source of his forgiveness and the direction for his life. And because of that response, David becomes the great king of Israel. But Joab's story is not as well known. Joab remains loyal, at least for a while. For instance, he brought David in for the capture of that city because he wanted David to take credit and all of that. In the rebellion of Absalom, David's son, Joab remains loyal to the king, marshals the troops against Absalom's rebel army. But Joab's life of violence turns him rebellious too. Before it's over, Joab murders 2 of David's military leaders. He kills David's son against David's specific orders. He sides with one of Solomon's rivals for the throne, even though Solomon is David's choice. By the end of Joab's tragic story, he is a bloodthirsty, revengeful killer. There's no indication in the text that he ever found an ethical center. No indication of awareness, repentance, prayer, forgiveness. There is nothing but one wrong choice after the next. And eventually Joab was so troublesome, such an outright embarrassment and problem to the throne, that David on his deathbed advised Solomon, "You should have him executed." Joab had just gotten so far gone. Soon you lose sight of where the line is, and after a while you may even forget there's a line. It leaves us, I think, with 2 things to consider. First is an honest, straight up, in the mirror confrontation with the question about whether or not you know where your line is. Where does the story pinch? Because at age 16 or 60, there is some ethical line you know you should not cross, and you battle with it all the time. And you can explain it. We can all explain it. My boss expects it, or the ever popular everybody's doing it, or who's going to get caught, who's going to know. But we know. So we've got to look in the mirror and ask if we've done all we need to build the muscle needed to know that we will never cross that line again. But secondly, this story is a reminder that the worst of who we have been does not write our entire story. At the end of this horrible, exploitive, violent story, David repents. He sets a new course. He receives the forgiveness of God, and he moves into a clean, new life with purpose and direction, a full and good future. And Joab, on the other hand, starts off crossing what arguably is a moral line. Then he crosses the next line, which isn't as arguable. Then he crosses the next line and the next one till he doesn't know where the line is. No repentance, no regrets, no prayer that begins, create in me a clean heart, O God. And his life ends in a most tragic way. So it's a reminder to us all that the rest of our story is yet to be written. We get to choose which path we take next. We get to leave here making a conscious decision about which kind of life we're going to lead. But the best lives then and now, are lives that are led on the other side of this prayer. Create in me, O God, a clean heart, and renew a right spirit within me. Let us stand and sing and respond to the call of God.